Okay, for our examples for our lessons for module 15, we will start with the group by clause for grouping of data. So when you use a group by clause, basically it separates your data based on the given column. Okay, usually it is used together with the aggregate functions that we have discussed earlier, namely count, min, max, avg, and sum. Okay, so for our example, we will use the following table. So kindly pause your video so that you could copy the exact details of the tables that we need. So for this examples, we need table sales, sales order detail, table batting, which refers to baseball batting. We also have the orders table and the employees table. Okay. For our data, kindly insert the following on your sales table. Then insert the following on your sales order detail table. And then insert the following data for batting, orders, and employees table. Okay, so after you have inserted the data, we will go through with our examples. Our first example is with the group by clause. So in this example, we are getting the columns department and average sales from the table sales, and then we will group it by department. Okay, so basically we are grouping the average sales per department from table sales. So once we execute this query, we will have the following output. So notice that in our table sales, we have inserted 4 data, but in our output, it only displayed 3 rows. The reason behind that is that there is 2 entry for the shoe department. Okay, so basically it average the two values, so we come up with 475. So this will be your output. Notice that there is no column name for the average column, so you can just put a column name if you want. Then we run our example. Okay, so there it is. Our next example will be our next example will be using the distinct keyword. Okay, so using the distinct keyword in order for us to separate the group, okay, using distinct. So basically, in some ways, group by is similar to using the distinct clause. So we have an example here that returns the same data using distinct and group by. Let us check. The first example is using distinct. So we have select distinct, sales order ID, carrier tracking number. And then the next example is using group by, sales order ID, and carrier tracking number. So remember that when using distinct, if you are returning two or more columns, in order for distinct to work properly, what it does is concatenate the returned values. So in this instance, we are concatenating the value of sales order ID together with the tracking number. So it will return the distinct data of both columns. So whereas when using the group by clause, basically we are returning data and then it is grouped together by the columns that you want to. So in this case, we are returning the columns based on the sales order ID followed by the carrier tracking number. So let us check if indeed we could use group by or distinct when we are grouping our data. So these are the result for the two. So basically they are the same. Okay, now the question is, can we use distinct together with the aggregate function? Now, if we are, let us try to use the aggregate function for this statement. Let's see if it will work. Now, for the sales order ID, let us check. Okay. Let us try to do an aggregate function for the unit price. Let's see if it will work using distinct and using the group by clause. So we will get the average unit price. Let us see if this will work. Okay, upon running, notice, okay, the error. Column sales order detail that sales order ID is invalid in the select list because it is not contained in either an aggregate function or the group by clause. Therefore, we cannot use distinct if we are to use an aggregate function in the query. How about, okay, let us remove this one. How about the group by clause? Let us try to run the example. Okay. In the group by clause, it was able to execute properly. So even though distinct and group by can be used in order for us to output a group data, the distinct clause cannot be used when we are trying to also return an aggregate function. So that is the limitation of the distinct clause. Okay, so let us now go with our other examples. Okay, we have here first example, group by clause together with an aggregate function count. And then on the second example, we will try to order the result. So based on your lecture, modify the statement so it sorts the group by sales order ID and carrier tracking number. So let us try to add an order by clause using the two columns. So let's see if this will work. Okay. So the first one, of course, it will work. It will display the count. Now, the question is, will this second line work and will it be able to order the sales order ID and the courier tracking number ascending in ascending order? Okay, let us check. So number of lines, the first query work, and then the second query also work. Okay. So it was able to sort it in ascending order, but I think that is the default order. So we will try to change it to descending. Let us see if it will work. Okay. So notice it is now sorted in descending order. So that is how you would use the order by clause after you have used the group by clause in your query. The next example will be a using um, different samples of aggregate functions together with the group by clause. So we will use sum, average, count, okay, together with calculation. So in this example, we will use sum divided by the count. So let us try if these samples will work properly. We have two statements. The first statement uses sum, average, and count. And then the second statement uses sum and average. But in this one, sum is divided by count. Okay. And then it will return the output. Let us try to run. Okay. Could not find. Okay, I think we're missing alias. Okay. Okay. So let's take a look at the last two query. So in the first query, we have count, average, and sum. And then on the last query, we did a sum and then we divide it by the count together with the average. Okay, so you could use multiple aggregate functions in one select statement. Next is using the having clause. When using the having clause, the good thing about the having clause is that it provides some sort of like a where clause for your aggregate function, because when using the having clause you could make use of the aggregate function to have a certain limit on the data that you will be returning using your group by clause. So for example, in this query we are getting the year ID, team ID, the sum of the AB column, sum of the HR column from the table batting, and then we group it by the year and the team ID. But we are getting the data we're in, okay, the HR divided by the AB, or the home run divided by the bat, or the number of times you hit the ball, should be greater than or equal to 4.5%. Okay, and then after that, we use the order by clause. So basically, if you are using the having clause, you can have a limit on the result of the aggregate function that you want to return. Okay. We cannot use the where clause for this one. Okay, so basically, the having clause is just like a where clause. However, it is limited, or it is used for aggregate functions. So let us try to execute our examples for having. So we have the first example is using the table sales department. We will return all department having an average sales of greater than 500. Okay. The next example is just a basic group by and then order by example. The third example, we will return all the datas wherein the sum of our HR or home run is greater than 20. And then in our last example, we will be returning the sample that we have on our lecture. So let us see the data. Okay. So we have four output. So one, two, three, four. Okay. In this output, we use the having clause in order for us to limit all the department with an average sales of greater than 500. So notice we have 550 and 1,500 average. On the second one, this is just a group by and order by example. And on the third one, we returned all the data having home runs, okay, having total home runs which is greater than 20. So we have here 41. And then on the last example, we returned, okay, a data wherein the home runs divided by the bats, so 41 divided by 380 should be greater than 0.045. Okay, should be greater than 0.045 or 4.5%. So that is how you would use having. Always remember when using having, it is limited to the group by clause, particularly those having those using aggregate function. It serves as the limit for the return data, much like a where clause. However, you cannot use a where clause for limiting the data when you are using the group by clause. Let me show you an example. For example, we want to replace this with a where clause. Will it work? Okay, try to run it. Okay, so you will have an incorrect syntax error. Okay, for our last examples, we will be using or we will be joining tables. Now, there are different means on joining tables. You could use the where clause, and then what you will need to do is to connect the primary key to the foreign key. As in this example, we are connecting NID from table name to NID of table salary. Basically, we are connecting the primary key of one table to the foreign key of another. Okay. Or we could also make use of the joins, particularly the inner join, and compare or connect one column to another. Okay. So this example, we will be making use of the where clause in order for us to join two tables, namely the orders and employees table, and then we will make use of the inner join, okay, in order for us to connect those two tables. In this example, we will be returning, so we have four queries. We will be returning the same data. However, we will be using different approaches. Okay. In my opinion, it is actually when you are joining table, it is better to use the join operation, although it is longer, simply because it is easier to maintain and easier to um, check for your code, especially when you are connecting two, three, four, or more tables together. So let us check. In our example, I have given an example using alias. Okay, in this instance, look, we use ONE to represent orders and employee, and then I just use E dot then O dot, sort of like a shortcut to refer to my table instead of calling the actual table name, which will make our query longer. Okay, that is also applicable to joins. Notice I have used O and E also here. So let us try to run our example. Okay. So notice we have four queries with four results, basically four same results. So you could use those approaches if you want to join two or more tables. When using the where clause, you just need to state the different tables separated by comma. If you use the inner join, okay, you just have to declare the table followed by the keyword inner join followed by the table you are connecting, and then using the keyword on followed by the column from the first table equal to the column on the second table. So that is how you would join table.